self-acceptance in personal development, in mindfulness, in healing work is like the holy grail. Like, you have to get to self-acceptance and accept that you are doing your best. And I say, no, you're not doing your best. You don't know what your best is. You have no idea what your best is. We are capable of so much more than we imagine.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Giovanni, welcome. I'm very excited for this conversation
Thank
because
you, Sue.
I really am, because as I was preparing, I just had more and more and more questions. I think it's going to be amazing. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, good. And like I said, I'm thankful you're here. Let's dive in. I want you as my guest to just give a little bit of background. I love to let my guests just introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there.
So I'm an author, meditation teacher, and self-discipline coach. I've been practicing meditation since I was 14 years old, and also reading. I've read at this point more than 300 or maybe 400 books on meditation, personal growth, psychology, spirituality, all of that. And in the past 10 years, I have been helping people with meditation, self-discipline, mindset, confidence through my books and courses. And so that's what I do.
Wow. Okay. So meditating since you've been 14. That is to me, that's, a little n I don't wanna say strange, but it would be foreign when I think about normal 14-year-olds. Meditation is not something that is on their radar.
Right.
So at 14, how did you get introduced to meditation, and what did you find really intriguing about it for you?
I think I had a lot of restlessness inside of me. I was seeking for something. I didn't know what it was. And I started reading about metaphysics, religion, philosophy, self-help, and many of these books were saying that meditation is really important. So the first times that I tried this practice by myself, just off a book, I felt like, wow, this is different. I have never felt like this before. I enjoy this. Like, it seems like I'm going into a deep place that I'm not familiar with. And so I was intrigued with those states of mind that I was experiencing in meditation, and I wanted to go deeper. So for about 2 years, I explored on my own, and one day I went to a meditation workshop where there was a guided meditation for maybe about 20 minutes. And at the end of the workshop, I decided that, okay, I'll practice meditation every day for the rest of my life, and that was the beginning.
That's a commitment right there. There are different types of meditations, correct? Like, there's different ways you can practice meditation. What one really works for you?
There are hundreds of different styles, and even though they all share some common benefits, there's still a big difference between them. Just like there are hundreds of different sports, different ways of exercising your body, and all of them are going to be good for your health and improve your cardiovascular system, etc. But still, the way you are developing yourself in each of them on a physical level is very different. And it's the same thing with meditation. So it's important to know what you want to get from the practice. If you're after spiritual enlightenment or healing or just calming down or learning how to focus really well, etc., depending on your goal and also on your personality, there would be a different type of practice that would be better suited to you.
How does one then go about finding which meditation practice then would work for them, since there's so many different types?
So I never found any system explaining that. That's why I wrote my first book, Practical Meditation, to kind of give an introduction so people can at least understand, like, oh, this meditation is more for this type of people. It involves these type of experiences. It gives these types of benefits. This other meditation is different, and so like this, they can go through 30 or 40 different styles that I explain in that book, and understand who they are and what they want, and then choose accordingly.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay. Well, I will dive into that book next. So let's talk about your most recent book called Wise Confidence. It combines, from your website, combines ancient wisdom and modern science, which I love the combination of, and it gives you a clear roadmap to self transformation, which I think a lot of us are searching for nowadays and trying to find out, hey, who we really are. So let's talk about your book. Can you define what wise confidence is and why it's important for people to cultivate that in their lives? Let's start there.
So there are two extremes. One extreme is self doubt, and the other extreme is overconfidence. In self doubt mode, you are your own worst enemy. You have no conviction about things. You don't know that you will succeed. You don't believe that you will succeed. You are diminishing your own power, your own capacity by doubting what you can do. And therefore, you don't feel very focused, very motivated, very, you don't commit as fully. Either you don't start big projects and you just kind of are coasting in life, or if you start them, you go forward half-heartedly. You're not showing up with all that you have, and obviously that state is very limiting. On the other side of the spectrum, we have overconfidence or arrogance, and that is also limiting. In this state, you have a lot of focus and you're motivated, you have full conviction that you're going to win and that it's going to happen, but you're deluded. You don't know your weaknesses and limitations. You don't know the challenges of the path ahead. You are underestimating the challenges. And therefore, you also don't show up with all that you've got because you think that you only need a little bit of effort to win or to overcome or to move forward. Now, in the middle, we have wise confidence. It's that balanced state in which you're not underestimating yourself, like in self doubt, and you're not underestimating the path, as in overconfidence. You simply focus on showing up as your best self with what I call the five elements of confidence: determination, integrity, self belief, courage, and optimism. So you're not thinking about yourself. You're not in that ego trip of I suck or in the ego trip of I'm great. You're just like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is the challenge ahead of me. And I'm going to show up with my best and see what happens.
It's funny because overconfidence is something that I would think people would say, "Oh, I think it's good to be overly confident." Then you have that drive that you need to go into whatever it is that you wanted to accomplish. So I find it really interesting that there are these qualities to overconfidence that's not where you really want to be. You really want to be in the middle with this wise confidence where you know where you're going, but you know your limitations and you know what's going to drive you forward. I think for a lot of people, we don't go back to the Stoics. We don't go back to the ancient wisdom. When you engage people, do you find that sometimes you have to take them back into the past in order to help them overcome where they're at, to help them achieve in the future?
Well, a big part of my work is diving into these ancient wisdom traditions. In my case, mostly the Hindu tradition, a little bit of Stoicism and Buddhism, but mostly for me, the Hindu tradition. And then to update and translate what all of those insights mean for the 21st century person. So yes, we it's without this, it's very easy for us to just lose sight of what's important and lose contact with another way of being, another way of living that is more meaningful.
Between self-doubt and overconfidence, right? So, how would you differentiate between a healthy self-confidence and an unhealthy ego-driven behavior? Like, if you want to define the two for us, and then what strategies do you recommend for developing like that balanced confidence?
So, for example, if you want to quit your job and start your career as a freelancer or start your own business, in self-doubt mode, you will not do that, or you will not do that until you're absolute certain that you're going to succeed, which of course rarely, that certainty rarely comes. um, so you just don't take that step, or you take it in a way that is overly cautious and therefore slow, and you're playing very small. And overconfidence or arrogance You quit your job a little bit too soon. You expect that your business, your new business, or your freelance career is going to take off sooner than it will actually take off. And so you feel great. I'm going to do this. It's going to happen because I believe in myself. Then you put in some effort, and then you hit reality. And reality may not immediately bend to your will. Things may not go the way you expected. And then you did not allocate enough willpower, enough perseverance and energy for the road. And when that happens, people quit and then they go try something else or they go back to the job. Now, if you have wise confidence, you believe in your capacity to achieve that goal, but you're not deluded about how easy that's going to be, about how quick that's going to be. You have determination, right? That's another of the five elements, determination, meaning that you are committed. You have made a resolve, a resolution that I will make this happen, whatever it takes, however long it takes, because it's important for me. It's my aspiration. I want this. So when you have that determination and then you have courage as you go in and quit your job at the right time to go and pursue what you want, you have optimism that you believe it's going to happen. Otherwise, you wouldn't take that risk. But you are also aware of your shortcomings. You are aware of the things that you need to improve, the knowledge that you need to acquire, the obstacles that are going to be ahead of you.
How do you what's your suggestion for people then who are stuck in that, well, self-doubt mode, and it sounds like there's an element of fear there as well. What would you say to people to overcome that, like, that self it's almost like analysis paralysis in a way where they're just stuck there
Mhm.
and they wanna move. What's like a first step somebody could do to help move them forward in a healthy way?
The approach of the book is different from what people would find as an advice for this in other books. I don't believe in quick fixes. I want to go deep and do the real fix. And then when you're in the path of doing the real fix, the quick fixes can help you a little bit, but they are in the process of something bigger. So, what is the deepest fix here? The deepest fix is that for most people, self doubt or fear of failure or imposter syndrome, that is part of their identity. That is part of their conditioning, the way that they were brought up, certain experiences in the past, the way that parents, friends, teachers, family members spoke to them or about them or treated them. That creates a conditioning that I'm not good enough, or maybe, the world is a dangerous place. Or I better not try difficult things because if I fail, it's going to be horrible. There are many different ways that this conditioning can take. But if in your identity there is a sense of self doubt or imposter syndrome or fear of failure, then the only way is to change your identity, to transform your identity. Any transformation that is meant to be permanent needs to be a transformation of our identity. Instead, if you just go and use, power poses to feel better in the moment and dress really well and use affirmations, you're going to have a little boost of confidence, a little wave of confidence that comes up. And maybe that's what you need in that moment. And no, I'm not judging anybody here. But what happens when that wave collapses? You're back at your baseline. So you're not changing. There's no real transformation there. And instead, the path that I recommend in the book is that you become aware of your current identity, which I call your conditioned identity, and that you conceive a new identity, and that I call the aspirational identity. You conceive the new way that you want to be, your new self. And then in the book, I teach many tools that will help you move from the old self to the new self. And the new self that you conceive doesn't have that self-doubt problem, never had that self-doubt problem. The new self that you conceive has the qualities that you are trying hard to develop or that would make a big difference in your life if you had, but you don't have. Your new self doesn't have that problem. It thinks differently, it has a different paradigm. And so, what's maybe impossible for you or extremely hard for you is natural for your future self, for your aspirational identity. So, you create a new version of yourself, an ideal version of yourself like this. And then you learn how to embody that version, that in your day to day life, you live from your future self. You choose to see the world, to think, to act, to make choices based on your aspirational identity, what your aspirational identity would do, not what your conditioned identity would do. And every time you make this shift, you are weakening your conditioning and you are affirming your aspiration. And over time, it becomes easier and easier.
So what would be an example then for somebody listening? They're going like, okay, I've got this conditioned identity that I already have, and then I want to move to my aspirational identity. What would you say to somebody who's struggling to even define their identity? Because a lot of times it's, it's not the default thinking. So I know there's a couple of questions in there. Take it where you'd like.
So, and the challenge here is that we tend to think of our new identity based on the current identity just being a little bit better. So when we think like this, we're going to get linear improvement. It's going to get a little bit better. But what I suggest is forget everything about that you know about yourself. And if your life is a book and you get to write your own character, right? The previous chapters, they are already written. There's nothing you can do about them. But in the chapter that is happening in your life now, you discover this concept of the aspirational identity. And you, the author, realize that you can write a different character. How would you write your new character? What qualities, dreams, desires, aspirations that new character would have? And so that allows you to kind of think freely. And of course, you're not going to become the new character like this. If you struggle with self doubt your whole life, you can conceive of your new character having the confidence of James Bond or Katniss Everdeen. And it's not going to happen like this, but it gives you a shortcut. It gives you a mental model that you can learn to absorb and to inhabit.
Mm, okay. And so for a starting point, because I'm thinking about small steps, big wins, right? So for a starting point, if somebody's like, okay, I'm in a place where I don't want to be, then they can conceive, if they can't come up with an identity that they want to take in themselves, you could think of somebody like James Bond, or you could think of somebody who is an important figure in their life who they would want to embody.
Right.
I'm thinking about manifestation and visualization. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts on those in this process of trying to become this new identity?
Yes. So, in a way, what you're doing is you are manifesting the new you, right? You are manifesting, you are, the process of manifestation is that you conceive of something and then due to your giving energy to that new thing, to that blueprint. And that blueprint could be a change in your life externally, meeting the ideal partner, having more abundance, whatever it is. Or it could be that blueprint could be internal about how you will feel, how you will operate, how you will think of yourself, etc. The process is the same, whether it's an internal change or an external change. You create a blueprint. You conceive of your new life, or you conceive of your aspirational identity. And then daily, you energize that thought. You energize that imagination, that blueprint. And in the book, I talk about 4 elements that need to be present for affirmations to work and also for this manifestation work to work. And they are concentration, willpower, faith, and feeling, right? In a lot of the talk about manifestation these days, it's all about, believe it and feel it, and it's going to happen. Well, these are 2 of the elements, right? The belief is the faith element, and feeling, it's already there. But what about concentration and willpower? These elements most people are not talking about. And if you go back several decades when all of these ideas of manifesting came into the Western world, it all started with the New Thought movement that got influenced by spiritual concepts from the occult tradition in the West and from the Hindu tradition, right? So in the original, you get this idea that it's not enough to just think of something and then you can manifest it. You need to energize that thought repeatedly until it becomes a reality, until it becomes so solid that it has to trickle down into this world of matter and become something. So that's the idea. Napoleon Hill, right?
Mhm. Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich, like one of the fathers of the manifestation
Yeah.
movement, so to speak. He said, I spend 30 minutes every day thinking of the person I want to become. Right? That's the same process that I'm talking about. Only I'm not asking you to stay 30 minutes because most people won't. But it's basically you conceive of your aspirational identity. How do you want to feel? How do you want to think? How do you want to act? right? You think about that every day for a few minutes. That's what I call the daily alignment practice. It's in the book, and there's a guided meditation for it too. You think about that every day, and then throughout your day, you from time to time you pause. That automatic life that we have, you pause. You become aware of your aspirational identity again, and then you use your willpower to bring it to life. And that's what I call the PAW method: pause, awareness, and willpower. And so you start your day with that daily alignment practice. Throughout your day, you realign to your aspirational identity by using PAW. And at the end of the day, then there's a journal that you stop and reflect and see how you did in this process. And so if every day you have these checkpoints of awareness, these checkpoints of realignment, then day after day, that blueprint that you're creating for yourself is becoming more and more real. And there is a point there where it switches. It starts becoming more natural to feel and think as your aspirational identity than as your old conditioning.
I love that. We like checklists. We like things to, follow and do. And you were talking about affirmations, how there's four parts to them. There's the concentration, willpower, there's faith and feeling. Faith and feeling seems to be natural to people. Could you like expand a little bit on concentration and what that would be? Is that part of the just sitting in it and thinking about it, or is there more to it?
So concentration is keeping your attention on the same spot moment after moment. So if you are practicing an affirmation of I am calm and confident in all circumstances, let's say that this is the change you want to create in yourself. If you're repeating that affirmation to yourself 10 times every morning, but when you're doing that, you're thinking about other things, or there are lots of other thoughts, then you're not focused, right? And if you're not focused, it means that that thought that you want to manifest into a reality, that thought is not getting enough energy. It's not getting enough momentum, right? So concentration means to energize your thoughts with continuous attention.
Okay. You talked a couple times about energy, and I know what you mean about positive and negative energy and how the law of attraction works. For somebody listening who might not know, what does that energy mean to you? How would you define it?
Well, the way I would answer this depends on who is listening. I don't know who is listening.
People who want to change their lives and understand. I have a lot. I have a lot of very faithful followers. But this idea of just energy, that we are energy, that there is this quantum level that our bodies operate on. And I think I I think anyway, it's not talked about enough and it's not leaned into enough. And people can see it as maybe woo woo, it's not really real. But me personally, I believe in the positive, negative energy. So maybe the more fair question is, how do you see that energy being played out in someone as they are manifesting, as they're thinking of their new identity? What's the connection?
So we all have thousands of thoughts per day, and your mind has a certain amount of power. Let's say voltage, to use the metaphor of electricity. This is what I use in the book. And if you have an X amount of voltage and you divide that through so many different things, you have a certain amount of energy in your mind, and you divide that across thousands of different thoughts. All of them are going to be very weak. All of them are going to carry only a little bit of energy, and sometimes they're even contradictory. Part of you wants to lose weight, part of you wants to eat that cheesecake, so there's that contradiction. um, so for manifestation, you need to focus all your mental energy on a single intention, on a single thought for a period of time. And when you do that, that thought is different. That thought is not like all the other thoughts in your mind. That thought will feel different. Otherwise, everyone would be manifesting all the time, and we're not. Most of our thoughts don't amount to anything because there's not enough charge behind them. There's not enough attention and energy behind them for them to turn into something, right? So think about think about your attention as something that energizes whatever it touches on, right? When you think about negative things, it's going to energize those thoughts and emotions, which means that it's going to be easier for you to continue having those thoughts and emotions. And if you keep continue having those thoughts and emotions, they're going to accumulate even more energy, even more momentum, and the likelihood of they becoming reality is much higher. If you stop paying attention to those thoughts and emotions, they will little by little lose energy and eventually disappear. So, for consciously manifesting something that you want in your life, you would select one intention or one desire, and you would energize it with your attention continuously every day. In the yogic practice, there are certain protocols that you can use to manifest your desires, and in one of them, you would do that's the one that I've been trained in. You would do many breathing exercises to really fill your body with energy, and then you will focus on that image that you want to manifest wholeheartedly, like with full concentration, for sometimes up to an hour, and then you leave it alone. You kind of you have created that ball of energy, and then you send it to the universe and you leave it alone, and then you go live your life, and something is going to happen. If you have put it enough energy, something is going to happen.
Does faith come in there with the energy that's created? Where do you see a connection in there? I didn't learn about energy and manifestation anything till really recently in the last year or two. Prior to that, I was under the Christian where it's like God does all of that stuff. I pray to God and then wish it would happen. Now I really believe that there's still God. I don't deny the existence of God. The
Well, the Bible says that God made us to his likeness. And if he's a creator, so can we.
this connection between this energy that we have inside of us and then bringing it out into manifestation, it's not separate from God because God is a creator. And I think that's one of the things that I found challenging at first, to in order to embrace the idea of manifestation and this energy that we have inside of us. It's like, oh, how can we have this when everything that we have comes from God? I just find that the thinking about those things and manifesting them is just it it kind of takes who God is to the next level, if that makes sense. Because you can manifest this and then God takes over. I guess it's
Yes.
where you give the credit to too.
You know,
So
there are there's lots of questions in that.
I know,
But
I'm usually not like that, but, like, there's just there's so much depth and richness in talking about energy and power and where that comes from and manifestation. It's not a quick fix. Here's like there are sets of steps, but like you're talking about, you have to go deeper into the mind.
so, there are many ways of looking at life. There are many religions, there are many spiritual philosophies. Even within Christianity itself, I heard somewhere that there are over 400 denominations. Right, so that means that there are over 400 ways of reading the Bible. Each of them will give you a different conclusion, a different worldview, a different way of feeling about yourself, God, and the universe. So there are all of these. There are myriad of ways of or philosophies about life and existence. Some of them will help you with manifestation. Others will not. Others will say that it's impossible. Others they will say that it's the work of the devil. So you have to see what works for you. What do you believe in? In the spiritual tradition that I come from, God is not micromanaging the universe, right? So we can tap onto that divine, that higher power through prayer and mantras and other forms, but we can also make things happen through what was given to us, right? So that's a different way of looking. And when it comes to faith, from if you fully believe that there is a God and that when you pray he's going to listen, and when you ask he's going to give, and your mind is unwavering about that, then that thought has a lot of energy behind it, and that thought is very powerful. So when you have a thought like that, then something's going to happen. Now it's up to be discussed, or that thing that happened, was it God that intervened and made it happen because you asked, or was it the power of your own faith that made it happen? And if you believed a different God, or if you believed something else, it will also happen because the power came from within you. different philosophies will see it differently.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's what you believe on the inside of your head, not necessarily what somebody else has for you. Your book talks about living inside out versus living outside in. And as I was reading your book, I loved the concept. So, talk about what they are and then the difference between the two. And then I have some follow up questions on that too.
Okay. So, living inside out is you have a vision for what you want of and a vision of who you are, and you manifest that into the way you think, the choices you make, the way you feel, the things you do, and then the results you get in your life. It's inside out. You are creating first inside of you and then onto your life. When you're living outside in, something happens that influences the way you feel, that influences the way you think, that influences the image you have about yourself. It's outside in. So when you're living inside out, your exclamation, your identity is an exclamation mark. This is who I am, and no amount of external feedback will convince me to the contrary, because I'm holding on to what I believe in, what I am creating. I don't need external validation. When you are living outside in, your identity is a question mark, and it's very influenceable by what happens, by what other people think of you and say of you. And so living outside in is free is what's the right word? It's a form of prison, right? You're not really in control of your life. You are reacting to the environment. I call this the lower mind. You're living from the lower mind. It's like animals are only capable of doing that, and we humans can do that, but we can do more. Right? Animals, they live and die by their environment. They are a product of their environment. When we live in a way that something happens, someone tells us something, and that triggers a feeling in us, and we cannot be any different. We're living outside in. The outside is controlling the inside. Right? We're just reacting to the environment. Now, on the other hand, we have the capacity as human beings to thrive regardless of the environment. And we have done that as a species for millennia. We have the capacity to say, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I believe in, and I will continue until it happens. And it doesn't matter what's happening, it doesn't matter if I'm failing, I will continue until it happens. So that is living inside out. When you're living inside out, your aspirations are shaping your life. When you're living outside in, you're waiting for things to happen. And depending on what happens or what doesn't happen, then that is your life, you know. So a simple example, maybe you have made the decision to change careers and start becoming learning how to you want to be a writer, let's say. If you're living outside in, you begin writing and then you're looking for feedback to see if you can do this or not, if you're good or not. And then you write a book and you send it to a couple of publishers and no one is interested, and therefore you interpret that I can't be a writer because it's what's happening. Now if you're living inside in, you have made a decision that I'm going to become a writer. And when you write and submit your manuscript to some publishers and you don't get a response, that can mean 1,000 different things, but not that you will give up, not that you're not a writer, not that it's not going to happen, because you already decided that and you're living inside out. So, in summary, either your aspirations are bending your reality or your reality is bending your aspirations.
I love that quote. Either your reality is bending your aspirations or your aspirations are bending your reality. One is a form of empowerment and the other is a form of disempowerment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I love the idea of living inside out. From the book, I pulled out a quote too that I wanted to also follow up with on this concept. You said from the book, it's quote, "It is worth repeating when you are living inside out, nobody can make you feel anything without your permission." And I love the English language when it's used, when the words are used strategically. And this quote hit me because it empowers me that nobody can make me feel anything without my permission. and how I mean, I've had conversations where with people where they say, "That made me person made me feel blank." This quote gives us permission to say, "Okay, it's not about that other person."
Mhm.
My question is, how has the power of that statement played out or manifested in your life?
And so, just to clarify from the beginning, that other people can dump their negativity on you. They can say and do things that are triggering both other people and also events in your life and in society. All this can happen and will continue to happen, but you have the choice to determine what that means. If you are practicing, if you're cultivating awareness, and that's one of the key practices throughout all my work, if you're cultivating awareness, then there's going to be a space between the stimuli and your response. And that space is the space of your freedom. If you don't have space, then you are just going to react. Then you are living from the lower mind. Then you are repeating your conditioning, right? So what I'm saying with that quote is that no, you always have a choice. And the times you think that you don't have a choice is the times that you're just not aware. You have not paused and realized that you have that choice. So for me, this is something that I've been practicing for a very long time. And the first time that I realized that, I felt like this is so empowering. I felt that's just awesome because I can't control those bullies, but I can control what happens inside of me, right? And so I remember I felt so empowered, and so I held on to that teaching and continued practicing it. And I still see new forms of unfoldment, right? That sometimes there may be a pattern inside of me to act in a certain way or to think in a certain way, and then for a moment I realized, like, oh, that's the voice of my dad in me, or that's the influence of my mom or that person or that thing, and I have a choice here. I can let that determine who I am, or and that would be living outside in, or I can determine who I am and ignore the rest.
You've mentioned a couple times about people's past experiences. Where do you see past stories fitting into somebody's present reality, and how would you use their stories to help them move forward?
So the stories is what you tell yourself about what happened. It's not what actually happened. It's often very hard to discern between the two. What we keep is the story plus our interpretation of what happened. And you're not in control of the facts. You can influence the facts, you cannot control the facts, but you can control the stories. You can control what that means to you and the stories you tell yourself. And so if you just lost your job, this can be interpreted to mean the worst thing that could happen. It's the worst timing ever. What's going to, what does this mean? Maybe I have no future in this career. It could mean all of that. Or it could mean like, oh, maybe this is the push I needed to start a career that is more aligned with my purpose. And you didn't choose losing the job that happened beyond your the influence of your will, but you get to choose what that means to you. So when you realize that, then your past stories, they are not going to bind you anymore, because you have taken ownership. You realize that it's not the fact, is what you make of the fact. Like one of my past teachers has said, it's not what happens to you, it's what happens in you that matters.
I have I had my coach. I've had a coach for about 8 months now, and we were going back into my past stories, and he said to me, "Sue, do you think things happened to you, or things happened for you?" And just switching it from things happening to you, the word to things happening for you, the word for,
Hmm.
is basically what you're talking about as well. It's just that shift where I realized, oh, wait a minute, it one moves from a life of being a victim to having a life where one that is full of choice, reframe, rewrite, take a different lens to look at whatever it is that happened to you in that situation. So I love the concept of living inside out, which brings back to this whole idea of empowerment and how, you can design the life that you want. Um, from that, if there's somebody listening and they're going like, I identify with living my life outside in instead of inside out, what's one practical thing that you would suggest somebody could do today to help them move in that direction?
It all starts with awareness, the recognition that, like, oh, now I can see the pattern. Now I can see how this is actually at the root of many of the challenges that I've had. Right? That recognition, and it's one thing to happen it in 10 seconds, and then you have a eureka moment, and then you forget about it and you move on to the next podcast. And something else to really absorb, and to reflect and to think and maybe to journal, like, what does that mean? What does it mean for me? That What would it mean for me to start living inside out? Right? And to really live that truth, to live that new insight, until it really influences your life, until it really changes. So I would say start with awareness, and then the next step, the next logical step, is deciding then, well, if it is within my power, then who will I want to be? What will I want to be? Now that I know that I'm not only a character in the book, I'm also the author of the book. Now that I realize that, how does that change things for me? How will I rewrite my own story?
I love the analogy of being the author and not the character. What I appreciated about what you were talking about is that a lot of this process is not overnight. It's going to take time in order to change. Some things happen quickly, it can, but I think there needs to be that grace there for us when things don't go as fast as we want them to. What are your thoughts on the driver behind self doubt is fear of failure? Do you find that fear of failure is an underlying reason for self doubt, or are there other ones in there too?
Oh, there are definitely other ones. Sometimes fear of failure can be the cause of self-doubt, meaning that you are afraid to fail, and you're afraid to fail because you have failed in the past and it was very painful, and something inside of you made a commitment not to fail again. And the only way to not fail again is to not try anything difficult or anything big or anything meaningful. And so, when you are about to try something, when you're about to get excited about something, that self-doubt comes to say, like, you're probably not going to be able to do it, and then you give up. So yes, that self-doubt was a minion of the underlying fear of failure. That can often be the case, but I can imagine how the opposite might be the case, that self-doubt might be the underlying thing, and then fear of failure is an expression of that. Human psyche is complex, but yes, one could be the result of the other. One could be protecting the other.
Oh, okay. I didn't think about it that way. So, for fear of failure, if somebody has those past experiences, and you could say the mantras, your past does not dictate your present or your future, but how can somebody move beyond that if they're stuck there? Like, they don't want to take a chance on something because of those past. Like, you can hear it, but there's a difference between hearing it and then embodying it and really knowing it.
Well, that's where it comes the concept of aspirational identity, of reinventing yourself. If Giovanni's identity is such that whenever he's trying something big, there's fear of failure, then and that fear may be so gripping and so intense and so deep rooted that may take years of therapy and personal development, and a lot to get out of that. Or Giovanni could then conceive of a new way of being, a new Giovanni, one that, yes, he has also failed in the past, but he sees those failures differently. And he has this belief that failures are here to make me, not to break me. And he believes that even if I fail 99 times, that doesn't mean I'm going to fail the 100th, and that the only failure is giving up. You conceive of a different version of yourself that sees things differently, a version that doesn't have that problem naturally. because that person thinks differently. And then you embody that, you operate from that point of view.
Do you have an example from your life where that has played out?
Well, I use this technique of embodying an ideal aspiration all the time. Like every day, I do the practice of the daily alignment practice. Um, Not particularly for fear. Fear, I think, in the past I have dealt with in other ways. But you can use this shift for anything. You can use this shift to improve your performance in an art, in a sport, in public speaking. For example, if you're struggling with public speaking, you can conceive of a version of yourself that is very eloquent and charismatic, right? And you create a really clear mental image of how does that new you speak, until you can almost feel it like you're inside that person's brain and mind and body, and you feel what makes him tick, and then you say, this is how I'm going to speak today, right? And because of the mirror neurons or whatever other maybe metaphysical explanation we can give, this works. Many athletes and performers have used this for many years, and it works. So that's the work of the aspirational identity.
Yeah, the brain doesn't know the difference between reality and fiction, does it? Like, you can almost trick the brain into thinking that this is what you are. I believe that's what's underlying that when you embody or you think about that person that you wanna become.
Well, it's the
Um,
same as the placebo effect,
yeah,
right? You
so true.
believe that healing has taken place, that you went through a real surgery while you went through a fake surgery, that you took a real super effective medicine while you took just sugar,
Yeah.
and the body responds accordingly.
Yeah, that's amazing how powerful the brain can be and how the energy can actually get excited within your body to do these things. I mean, I've had a guy on the podcast who healed himself of cancer just
Mhm.
because he changed a few things and then was thinking about and seeing the body heal. So that's I find it fascinating. I think that's just a whole other
Yep.
realm of study there. You talked about fear and dealing with fear, that you deal with fear in other ways. What are some of the ways that you deal with fear?
It's rare for fear to visit me, um, at least nowadays. Hmm. Because I've been practicing meditation since I'm 14, it's hard for me to differentiate the normal self and but fear sometimes comes as caution, like, oh, are we being kind of reckless here? Am I investing more money in this doubtful thing than I should have? But that's not necessarily a problem, that level of inner dialogue of part of your mind playing the devil's advocate, that can be a good thing. But if we're talking about crippling fear that prevents you from doing something that you want to do, I can't remember the last time I've experienced that.
What's something that very few people would agree with you on?
Oh, many things. Even the whole thing that we talked about, the power to manifest, many people would disagree with that. Let me see if there's a more meaningful answer here. So in the circles that I operate more, the meditation and mindfulness, etc., there are certain ways of thinking that are very different from the way I think, and I'm very strong about my point of view, and I'm sure that many of my peers would disagree. For example, I believe that self acceptance is not always a good idea. Self acceptance in personal development, in mindfulness, in healing work is like the holy grail. Like, you have to get to self acceptance and accept that you are doing your best. And I say, no, you're not doing your best. You don't know what your best is. You have no idea what your best is. We are capable of so much more than we imagine. And often saying, I am doing my best is an excuse. It's an artificial ceiling that we're putting on our potential. It actually means like, I'm doing the best that I feel like doing in this moment. Not I'm doing the best that I can do. I'm doing the best that I feel like doing in this moment. But of course, if we put it like that, it's we don't like to admit that to ourselves. In truth, like, our potential is infinite, or at least undefined. And when you say I'm giving my best, I in most cases I will not agree with that.
Okay, well, that makes sense because if you can always be 1% better each day, then there really is no ceiling. If you think about it, if you come from the belief that you can improve, we're not operating at our best self, then you can't get 1% better each day. And then you're striving towards perfectionism. I could always be better. Like I can be a better interviewer tomorrow. I could be a better person tomorrow. So there's no ceiling. How does it keep people from going to, oh, I failed today? It's a
Yes,
strange.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's um it's it's a different way of reading the same fact, right? The fact is I'm not doing my best. Okay, we never are. We are in this continuous infinite never ending process of getting better, or not. Some people are not getting better. They're just, if life forces them to get better, they might. Otherwise they're not getting better. But for us that are growth oriented, right, for us that are growth oriented, we are in this never ending process of getting better in the things that we're putting our attention in on, right? And that's a fact. No, we're not giving our best. Now, there's different ways of reading this fact. One way of reading this fact is like, uh, so I'm not good enough if I'm not giving my best. You know, why am I not giving my best? And kind of beating yourself up. That's one way of looking at it, and it comes from a specific conditioning that is very common these days. A conditioning that you know, if you grew up with overcritical parents, with bullying siblings, or with experiences of discrimination, etc., then that may have built that programming inside of you that feels that you're never good enough. And then when you hear this guy come on this podcast and say that no, you're never doing your best, then like, "Ugh." But no, wait, can we look at this from a different perspective, right? I'm not doing my best. Therefore, first, does that mean that I'm not a good person? Does that mean that I don't have value? Or is that simply a fact of nature? That I'm never using my full potential because we don't know the limits of our full potential. And if that's the case, can we look at this instead of through the eyes of self-loathing? Can we look at this through the eyes of opportunity, of exploration, of a desire for growth and excellence? And then it will give a very different feeling. Now, there's this quote from T.S. Eliot: only those who risk going too far can possibly discover how far one can go. I think this is the idea.
Yeah, I've heard that quote before. I love it. And it's just what, yeah, it's really what lens we look at it through. You
Hmm.
know, whether we're viewing it as, like you said, self-loathing, or whether we're going to use it to propel us to become a better version of ourselves each day. I've heard it said, I had a friend of mine say that if you start your day being the best that day, you know, then you can only get better. And so when you wake up every morning in the best frame of who you are for that day, and then you take it that as your baseline, then you can only go up from there
Right.
if that's your perspective on that. So thank you.
And you know, I believe this, and I'm never beating myself up. Like I do not have this habit of beating myself up.
I think it's a
And
mind shift.
right.
Yeah. It's
And in practical terms, then if you believe that, if you understand that, no, I'm actually never giving my best, then can you turn that into a question like, what would it look like for me to give my best in this moment?
mhm, mhm.
Then this becomes something practical that it points the way to growth.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then if somebody determines, like, you know what, I didn't quite give my best in that moment, and they just analyze what they did and said, okay, this is what I need to change for the next time I encounter this, it wouldn't be seen as a failure then. It would just be seen as a learning opportunity for
Right.
growth. Yeah.
And we cannot optimize everything all the time. You know, optimizing something takes energy. Wanting to improve in an area takes energy. And you may not want to use this way of thinking for every area of your life. That would be it's impossible.
It's
But you
exhausting.
right,
I would
you
think.
can use it for the areas of your life that are most meaningful for you. Maybe that is improving your relationship with your partner. Maybe that is improving your craft, your work. You cannot do it with everything.
Mhm. That's a good point. I'm glad you said that because sometimes people Like, I could see people analyzing their life and going, "Well, I've got these 10 different areas, and I need to start working on all 10 of them and changing all 10 of them at once."
Yeah.
And I've heard it said once that scattered energy leads to scattered results. Is it scattered energy leads to scattered thinking, leads to scattered results? It just when you're
Yes.
scattered, it's just you're going
Yes.
everywhere but nowhere.
And that's why in 10 years of coaching, I have never once used the famous wheel of life. Because, and I have had
What
people
is
come to
that?
me.
I've never heard of that before.
The
I mean,
wheel of
I've
life is that wheel
yeah.
where you see the 8 areas or 10 areas of your life, and
Oh,
then you're
okay.
supposed to say like how satisfied you are in each area of your life, and
Oh,
come up
okay.
with goals. Come up with goals for all the 8 or 10 different areas of your life, so that you can continue. Like no, like in the work that I do in mindful self discipline, which is the previous book, it's choose the 2 most important areas of your life, and we're going to create goals around those areas. Everything else is just maintenance mode. Everything else is like, okay, the financial area of life for me is not the most important area of my life. So, am I doing my best in my finances? No, absolutely not. Could I do better? Yes. Do I want to put my energy there? No. Because if I put my energy there, that energy I'm not putting in the area that is actually more important. And this one is okay now. So it's this, I don't beat myself up for not doing the best that I can in finances because I'm aware of where that sits in my priorities list.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you explained that because I'm part of a mastermind group and we talk about the 8 pillars, the 8 or 10 pillars. Well, we have 8, but it's all those areas. And we get together and it's like, "Oh, how are you doing in all of these?" And then it feels so heavy
Hmm.
to think, "Oh, I'm falling short in this area." You look at all 8 of them and you look down and you're like, "Oh, well, I'm doing great in 2 and the rest I suck at." And then you
Yeah.
just it's a very heavy feeling. So I really appreciate the fact that you said that you focus on the 1 or 2 and you set your goals around those for now. And then it's I don't know, I have to tell you, I'm just freeing hearing that.
Yes, 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 yeah,
It's just freeing because you can't hold on to all that stuff at once, and
right,
they're in all these planners, like everyone should
right.
hit all this, like, this is something that you should do because it's in my planner. Once a month, I go through and I look at that wheel and I'm like, "Man, I fell short
And then
in
you
that
feel
area
guilty
again."
and you feel
Yeah,
dissipated and yeah.
it's
No, I
terrible.
don't think that, Mozart or Einstein or Abraham Lincoln were doing great in all areas of life.
Yeah, yeah,
They
it's
were
hard
super
to
focused on 2 or 3 that matters, maybe 1 in some of those
yeah,
cases.
and whatever
And
their Jonas zone of genius or calling was,
right,
that's where they went, the one thing. I was thinking of Gary
right.
Keller's The One Thing.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah. Great
Yeah,
book.
where you just focus on that one or those 1 or 2 things. What would you say then to somebody who has multiple areas in their life that they're focusing on? So I can think of somebody who they are running a business on the side, they have real estate going on, they've got an investment portfolio. Oh yeah, and by the way, they have a podcast.
Mhm. Yes.
Is
Well, they're not focusing on different areas at the same time. They are trying to juggle different areas at the same time. It's a different. There's that quote, I forgot who said it, but if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. And I think that perfectly applies.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm gonna have to go back and revisit that quote. I have more than 3 in my life right now. But
Yeah.
do you find sometimes if somebody does come to you and they do have more than 3, do you find that there's a common thread in all those things that they're doing?
There might be a common thread, but even if that's the case, let's say that you're running your business, so it's just one area of your life. But in that area of your life, you are trying everything. You're trying, and your efforts in that area are very haphazard, right? So you're not going to get good results. You're not going to get momentum because you're dividing whatever energy you have. You're dividing across too many things. Um, so that's the challenge of focus. Focus means saying yes to the things that are most important, no more than 3, because if you have more than 3, you have none. You say yes to the things that are most important and defend that yes with 1,000 no's, and that's what it takes.
Defend the yes with 1,000 no's. I've heard it said, if you say yes to something, what are you saying no to? But I
Mm.
like the defend your yes with 1,000 no's.
Mhm.
That's a great quote.
Right.
I love it. I love it. So for you, what are your 3 areas or 2 or 3 areas that you focus on, you personally?
Yeah. So for me, it's spirituality, my work, and family. That's it. And family is mostly, everything is in place. So it's about maintaining the current structures and habits and time together, etc. And it's basically work and spirituality where the energy is going for growth. And inside each of these areas, also, then the way I like to think is that I cannot have more than two priorities for any of these areas for a period of time. So every quarter, when I go and plan, like, what are the going to be my priorities for next quarter, it's two. Right? I can have two priorities in my business. I can have two priorities in my spiritual practice, and I will consciously put as much time within that time bucket of that area of life. I'm going to focus as much time as possible on those two things, knowing that yes, there's going to be tasks that are important and don't fit in those two things, but having that clarity that these are the two things that I'm trying to focus on, or that I am focusing on, and everything else goes into a third bucket called other tasks.
I love the framework. I really do. That there's that spirituality, the family, and the work, and then no more than 2 priorities. I'm gonna do that in my own life. So,
Mm.
thank you. That's a one small step there. As we close up, there's always 3 core questions I love to ask all of my guests. So, the first one is, please, other than your books, which I would highly recommend all of them because I have been thoroughly enjoying, the book Wise Confidence. What is another book or resource that's had a significant impact on you that you would like to suggest?
Well, actually, that book that you mentioned a few minutes ago, The One Thing, I really like that book. I think it's one of the best books out there about focusing in terms of goals and priorities.
Yeah, it's a great book by Gary Keller.
Right.
The another question is, what is one question, or, and I know that this question might open a Pandora's box or like go into a longer discussion, and that's quite all right because it's one of my favorite questions. What's one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
So basically, start another podcast in 10 minutes where you are the questioner and the answer. Jokes apart. One topic, hmm, maybe self discipline, which is the topic of my previous book and kind of a core principle in my work. That's probably the topic. And then the question could be, what is what is mindful self discipline, which is what I call my framework in that area. And then the answer is that you know there's a common approach to self discipline out there, which is kind of very militaristic. It's that mental toughness, push yourself to do things like a drill sergeant inside your mind telling you what to do. And that approach works for some people, but even then it takes a lot of energy and it's not for everybody. The way of mindful self-discipline is awareness first, then willpower. That you start with an awareness of who you are and what you care about, and that already makes everything else easier when that awareness is really sharp and really clear. And whenever you are meeting self-discipline challenges in your day where I should be going this way, but my mind is telling me to go this way. You always start with awareness rather than trying to force yourself. You start with awareness. You remember what's important for you. You remember your commitments. You remember where these two choices are going to lead you. And then it's much easier to make the better choice. So, in that sense, self discipline is the art of living life in harmony with your values. It's not self punishment, but self respect.
Yeah, not that self abatement. Sounds like another podcast to me. And as we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Spend 30 minutes designing the person you want to be.
Perfect. That is definitely a small step. With a
And then there's the big step for the whole life.
Yeah, a small step with massive impact. I love
Right.
it. Yeah, well, small steps with the big wins. There you go. So think about the
Right.
life you want to be. There's your small step that is going to take time to evolve. And sometimes sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, you know. I love the best quote ever is um, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success.
Hmm. Yes.
I love it. And when you put anything on the proper horizon, then everything is a good investment or successful over time. If you think
Yes.
about it, you know.
Yes.
So, Giovanni, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed our conversation. How can people find you and reach out to you?
Sure. Me too. So you can go to highermind.com where you will find information about my books and about an app that has the guided meditations and the tools for the books.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Okay.
gift of your time. This has been an amazing conversation. I've enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.